In Next.js, we can have a route component that fetches some data. This route can be rendered when we build our app and stored in a cache as static HTML. But now every time someone requests this route, they are going to be served the static HTML from the cache. The component itself is not going to run for every request, and therefore our data is not going to be fetched for every request. This can make our route a lot faster, and it can be fine sometimes to serve cached data. However, in some situations, we might need to render our component and fetch our data every time the page is requested. And we can do that by manually making our route dynamic, or by using some APIs that make a component dynamic by default, like search parameters or cookies. In this case, when a route is requested, the component is going to run and the HTML is going to be dynamically rendered for each request. This allows you to get fresh data for every request, but it will use more server resources and therefore more cost, and your route can be a little bit slower. What if we would like to achieve something in the middle? Have some static content served from the cache and some dynamic content rendered on the server per request. So in this example, let's say the title and the content of a blog post can be cached since they are not going to change often, but for the comments, this can change more frequently, so we need it to be dynamic. In Next.js, we can achieve this with partial pre-rendering. Partial pre-rendering allows us to generate a static skeleton with some static content that is going to be served from the cache, while having some dynamic parts in the skeleton that is going to be rendered dynamically on the server. To do that, we move the part that we need to render dynamically in a separate component and fetch our data there. We can also add cache no store in our fetch call in order to make our component dynamic. Then in our route component, we fetch our static data and display it, but we use suspense to mark dynamic boundaries in our component tree and provide a static loading fallback. So now the title and content are going to be static, while the comments are going to be dynamic. This way, when the route is requested, the user is going to see something immediately, which is the static shell served from the cache containing our static parts and the loading fallback for the dynamic parts. The dynamic parts are going to be dynamically rendered on the server using the component that is wrapped with suspense, and then it is going to show up once it is rendered. Check out my free Next.js course here on my YouTube channel for more details.